Alright. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Overseers. My name's Proilios and I'm joined once again by my co-host Nightwing. Once again, we are missing OneHP. He is still pretty busy, but we are gonna try and do our best to review the Hangzhou Spark in the most comprehensive way possible. So, are you ready, Nightwing? How's your excitement level for this particular team?
It's right in the middle, just like the Hangzhou Spark is.
Alright,
It's about as mediocre as you'd expect. Maybe a bit over mediocre, exactly like Hangzhou Spark, I think.
well put, well put. So, this is actually a team that was pretty quiet for most of 2020. They weren't a really bad team, but they weren't a standout squad either. I think they just made like one tournament final, which was during the Countdown Cup. But other than that, they were just like they didn't have any like standout performances, like I said, right? And these middle of the pack teams are generally a bit harder to review because there's not really much chatter about them. You talk more about the top level teams and then the complete bottom. So anyway, I think let's get into the review. As usual, we'll be going with the tanks first, then the DPS, then the supports, and then the coaching staff, and then rounding things off with our final thoughts. So let's kick things off with the Sparks tank line for 2021, and that is Guxue and Takoyaki on main tank, and BERNAR and LiGe on off tank. So I think let's start off talking about both the main tanks, and I think I'll let you go first on this one, Nightwing. You can just share your thoughts on Guxue and Takoyaki. Go ahead.
Okay, everyone knows the deal with Guxue. I think a lot of his recognition initially came from his performance in the GOATS World Cup in 2018. I think that's the one where they went to the finals, right? Uh,
In 2018, was it?
which
I,
one was the GOATS one?
yeah. I think they went to the finals with Korea.
Yeah. So Gushue performed really well in that one, if I remember correctly, and that's probably what got him signed to Hangzhou in the same year. Obviously, he would have performed well in trials, but apart from that, he's always been known for his monkey. I think a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, but I think he's on an individual level. If people would review him, they see that he has some really good plays, but he's not seen that much success with Hangzhou. Obviously, that's not entirely his fault, but yeah, it's just a skilled player, but it's not able to really deliver results as a team overall. So he did get them into the Countdown Cup, I suppose, this year. Um, in 2020, but that was a very bad loss to Shanghai. And I think Hangzhou kind of just got lucky with the bracketing for the tournament, honestly. But yeah, apart from that, Takoyaki comes in from having a kind of a very varied profile, working with Element Mystic, Meta Athena, Team Diamond, and now he's on Hangzhou. Um, I have seen only oh wow, sorry. I've only seen a bit of his gameplay. It seems promising. I think he's probably someone that can try and split the roles with Gushue at certain times. But I think it wouldn't really be a huge mistake probably to take Gushue as a regular tank as well. I could be wrong. He could be a much better player than I think, but yeah, that's my thoughts. I think maybe they can find a system similar to Shock where someone's taking off some pressure from Gushue because currently the guy has to play everything.
Hmm. All right. So um, I think that Gushua is still a really good main tank player. Like you said, he is individually skilled. He is most famous for his Winston, but from what we've seen in his 2 seasons in the Overwatch League, his Reinhardt has become pretty good, and he also played a decent ball. Like he's not a playmaker on ball. Naturally, he's not like a top tier Hammond player, But I think he still used to buy enough space when his team used to play either triple DPS or just like Ball Diva Dive or even Ball Zarya when it was meta for a few weeks during hero pools. He's just overall, I think, an underrated main tank. He goes under the radar because his team is not as flashy and not even as bad actually to be spoken about all the time. We saw what he could do at his peak when he like made Hangzhou like helped Hangzhou be an extremely competitive team in season two. I would argue they were a top five team back then, and even though the team didn't see that much success in season three, I think he's one of the players who was the least problematic, like the least one of the least effective factors in that. And coming in to support him is Takoyaki, and Takoyaki is from Korea. He most recently played for Team Diamond. Based on his VODs, I would say he plays a really good Winston and Reinhardt. Although I don't think he's going to be fielded over Guxue on Winston unless they specifically want to run maybe a Korean tank line or something like that. But I could definitely see him playing Reinhardt over Guxue. He's currently underage, but he will turn 18, I think, in the like just after the league starts or something like that. So he will still pretty much see full playtime. And I mean, he was with Element Mystic for a while, but they rarely ever played him over Alpha, who was clearly more synergized with the team at the time. But I'm
The
still
alpha tank.
the Alpha tank here. And but that said, I'm still optimistic about this pickup because Team Diamond not a very strong participant in contenders, but he still managed to stand out and sort of make like a difference for his team, especially on Reinhardt. So I think it's a good pickup. I think he can really also gel well with sort of the Korean players on the team. They've added like more Korean as well as Chinese players. So on the communication front, if they want to run a full Korean tank line, then Takoyaki is there. I mean that's the biggest advantage. So yeah, those are my thoughts about the main tanks. And should I start off with the off tanks then, Nightwing?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right. So just like the Spark have one Chinese and one Korean main tank each, they've also got one Chinese and one Korean off tank. So that's BERNAR from Korea and Liga from China. Now, speaking of BERNAR, because we have seen him play for the London Spitfire in the league, um, all I really remember of him is like some good Sigma play. But I think he was overall he is at the moment a below average off tank in the league. A lot of people praise him for his play, probably because he was really good with Fusion University. But I think he's just overrated at this point. I made this point about Glister as well, where both of these guys were on London, and yes, they were a bad team as people said. I mean, yeah, they were lower down in the rankings, but they had some talented players who just couldn't gel well, and part of the reason is that they just weren't talented enough. And I mean, it's it's not a stretch to say that BERNAR is not going to be super competitive in the league this year. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts on him. And speaking of Liga, who's actually coming in from Team CC, and he's actually an even better Sigma player in my opinion. He can also play a good Diva and Zarya, and overall, just a great pickup. He's been winning a lot with Team CC in Contenders China, and really seems to have a good grasp on the game, and is definitely Overwatch League caliber. So it's nice to see him being brought in probably to supplement Gushua in whichever. I think he'll probably be played in a dive centric meta for the most part with Gushua. But I mean, it still remains to be seen whether or not Gushua Liga and Takoyaki BERNAR become like these two fixed tank lines for the team. But I could definitely see him being played with Gushua simply because dive is a comp that requires a ton of communication, and if you just enable Gushua on the Winston, he's just going to go ham. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the off tanks. And do you have any points to share?
I think you're right that we would definitely see Liga, at least in a dive kind of format where you would see him probably play Diva or sometimes Zarya, considering that we're looking at this double bubble kind of meta currently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that's a decent observation. Bernard, I think, is probably going to be the off tank that takes a bit of a backseat, because I think you're right in saying that considering the success that Liga has had, his Sigma is likely better than Bernard's as well. Bernard was probably uh, one of was not the worst player for London last year, I think, but he
Yeah.
definitely did not stand out too much. And I would not be surprised to see him probably stay as the the beta off tank instead of the alpha off tank. And um, I think he could maybe be brought in for something like hog play, because I have not seen a lot of hog play from Liga. But then again, who plays hog apart from like hog Zarya meta, which seems to be the staple in low. Um, but yeah, for like a bunker com, maybe I could see Bernard come in. But I think the mainstay off tank this season is going to be Liga, unless tryouts, not tryouts, I mean, unless scrim results and just team synergy really proves otherwise. That's pretty much all I have to say about the off tanks, I think.
All right, cool. So then I think let's move on to the damage dealers of the squad, and that's GodsB and Architect, who have been carried over from last year, and the two new signings are Shy and SeoMinSoo. So let me start off by talking about GodsB. Let's do the older players first. So GodsB is, as you know, the hit scan player for the team, and he was quite good in season two, but I wasn't impressed with his performance last year. Uh, he was just really quiet overall, didn't make too many plays, and probably won't be competitive this season either. I think his skill level sort of just being outmatched at this point by other hit scan players, even in the Korean region. So, yeah, I don't expect to see great things from him unless he magically turns around his performance. But that's really unlikely to happen considering how much stronger the hit scan market, especially, is getting this year, you know. So, he's going to be up against some really, really solid players. I mean, uh, let's not forget he's got players like Guangbong and he's got Lip, and it's just a really crazy hit scan market out there. And even on his own team, he's got Shy, whom we will talk about in a bit. But yeah, those are my thoughts on GodsB. And do you want to start us off on Architect, or unless you have more points on GodsB, of course?
I think you basically covered it with GodsB. I think over the years his skill level has just kind of plateaued. Not seeing anything too exciting from him in 2020 season. Uh, Obviously, it's hard to look like an amazing hit scan when someone like Hans was dominating the field. But now that Hans is gone, I think GodsB is still going to be not too much of a standout player. Um, but yeah, I think you're right in that he does even have contention with his own within his own team with Shai, who has had more success probably as of late. Um, but yeah, you wanted to talk about Architect? We can definitely do that. Architect comes in from the Shocks system. I think he was a bit overhyped on that team just because the team kind of worked together so well. He does definitely has some level of individual skill that puts him apart, but I mean, they trusted enough to play Ana over someone like Violet, who is a crazy flex support. So obviously, Architect does have some mechanics and some individual skill going for him, but I think he was still a bit silent, uh, just like the rest of the Hangzhou Spark when he transferred over in the 2020 season. Nothing too exciting coming out of Architect last season. Maybe this is a season that we get to see some more Architect, but uh, I think the public opinion of him has been boosted a bit by just the success of the system of the shock. I think coming down to a different system for Hangzhou, he's suffered a bit in terms of his performance. That's pretty much what I have to say about him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've said this before for multiple players, and I will probably bring this up in the future as well. But I think some players are being criminally overhyped or overrated because they have been part of great systems within certain teams. So, I mean, as we've mentioned multiple times, if you take certain players out of their current teams, if those teams are really successful, it doesn't guarantee that that player will do equally well or even close to that level on another team, right? It sometimes just depends on the system. And on the shock, Architect was, I mean, Krusty basically plays everyone to their strengths, and that's what happened with Architect. Uh, and but when he was brought onto this team, he and GodsB were trying to essentially cover all of the DPS because they didn't want to field Adora or Ado. So I mean, Architect did surprise us like with a surprisingly good tracer, but again, it wasn't that consistent. And I mean, yeah, his flexibility is an asset, but he's not been too competitive since he was brought onto the Sparks roster. So I don't expect great things from him this season either. But we'll just have to wait and watch. Maybe he'll come out and surprise us. And speaking of surprises, I mean, I don't think anyone expected this Spark to sign SeoMinSoo. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, do you want to take the lead on this? Then we can go on from there.
Uh, if anyone keeps checking their Twitter timeline, then they probably uh, were just thinking the same thing that the Hangzhou Spark did. Just fuck it, SeoMinSoo. um, and yeah, I mean, he's a player that I think did have his success with Runaway and with the Vancouver Titans, but it's not like he was exceptional as an individual talent. I would say it's just that he had a lot of pre-existing synergy with the team. Um, and honestly, the best hero I can remember SeoMinSoo for is Reaper. Like nothing special, personally. And but I think he's had some time off. Maybe he's been grinding. Maybe he's been taking those angs, taking some roids, and maybe we'll see a different side of SeoMinSoo this season that we haven't been able to see before. But considering that the hitscan role is already in contention with GodsB and Shy, it's probably not going to be on that. Maybe he's been brought in for some kind of like like Nico-esque, like brainy character, like brainy hero player.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because I think in terms of like flex, I think you would probably play Architect over him, based off of past performances, even if Architect has plateaued a bit. But I really don't know, honestly. I think maybe Architect and SeoMinSoo can kind of contend with the Echo, because SeoMinSoo has not really been too much in professional play during, like, after Echo was released, basically. So maybe he'll be a god at Echo. Who knows? I think people are really excited to see another runaway player come back, and I am as well. I'm just not sure what he really brings to the team, but I'm very curious to find out actually.
Hmm. So I think your sort of smart hero theory is quite valid because I mean, Sominsu had proven to be an incredibly smart player last year, especially on Reaper. I mean, Reaper is not a hero that requires insane mechanics, but if you saw he played Reaper for the Vancouver Titans in the double shield meta, and I think he was one probably the most consistent Reaper when it just came to even like the mid fight as well as his death blossoms. He would just manage his resources really well, time his flanks extremely well, and I mean it's quite similar to how he played Zarya, right? If you are someone who can manage cooldowns well, then you can play heroes like Reaper, Zarya, And even so, the some of the other flex DPS that he's famous for are like Pharah and Doomfist. So all of these heroes are require a lot of discipline with the cooldowns and partly good teamwork. And I think he might be being brought in for that role where if there's a meta that requires a lot of communication or teamwork, they can just slot him in instead of Architect, who's probably more of like the raw mechanical skill kind of player. But yeah, I think this is a super interesting Dark Horse pickup, and I mean, I was a big fan of SeoMinSoo's gameplay in season 2 of the league. So he seems to have a wide hero pool, which he hasn't got to showcase so far in the league. If you remember, uh, they played Haksal over him, obviously, because Haksal was that good. But it's like, the, I mean, this makes him really dangerous because I don't think people can expect what he's going to bring to the table. So he's not someone they can exclusively plan for unless they see a Zarya meta coming. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if SeoMinSoo was played over LiGe and BERNAR on Zarya if that's sort of the meta. Uh, but yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on him. And the final DPS on this team is Shy, who is coming in from Bilibili Gaming, which is also owned by the Hangzhou Spark. So I mean, he's one of the best hit scan DPS players to come out of China. I think he used to be a flex support a few years ago, but he transitioned to DPS and he had been doing incredibly well with Bilibili in contenders. Um, Overall, just incredible raw mechanical skill and incredibly good aimer. I mean, I don't think he'll be top tier, but he will certainly be competitive. And the reason being that he sometimes makes extremely greedy plays. If you watched his Wads in contenders, he sometimes goes on these incredibly cheeky flanks and doesn't end up getting value because they're just too ridiculous and he gets caught out. And I mean that's in contenders, right? In the Overwatch League, your opponents are going to be much more aware. They are going to be much more responsive to things like these cheeky flanks. So I mean, there's no way he's going to be able to pull those kinds of things off. So if he just plays disciplined and focuses on his aim, then he can certainly be a super competitive hitscan DPS. But like I said, probably not top tier. And do you have any points to add about him?
I mean, it's just another example of a young blood hit scan upcoming superstar kind of, well, not superstar, but at least promising young player that's coming into the league. And those are, it's somewhat of a gamble, but generally it seems to at least be somewhat worth it when you put these players in. As for the kind of flanking behavior you're talking about, I think uh, at the top tier of Overwatch, you basically just have to kind of control the pace of the game. The faster paced you are, the more you can kind of force out mistakes from an opponent. So maybe he can figure out how to use that in a good way. But yeah, I mean, Hitscan is starting to get a lot more heavily punished as the time goes on. Like even if Hitscan uh, is very important still, I think over the years you've seen that the impact Hitscan has is much lower now because people are taking corners lot more smartly, and
Mm-hmm.
there's just more shields. Sigma just slaps a shield right in front of your face, and you can't do anything. So yeah, he'll probably have to find kind of the right ways to navigate around that. But yeah, interesting prospect. I think I would probably see him at least like give him enough chances to show his stuff over GodsB, because GodsB is a player that you kind of know what you're getting with, whereas with Shy, he has had some good performances in contenders, and um, I would love to see him develop into being a better player.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Uh,
the yeah, go on if you have anything.
no, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right. So I think one major advantage they have with Shah is that his mechanical skill does seem to be better than GodsB's at the moment. Maybe they reserve GodsB for the Tracer. I think that's what's going to happen pretty much. And another advantage is that hitscan is not a particularly communication oriented role. So even though Shai is a Chinese player, they could certainly play him in like a Korean squad and still get value out of him, because if all he has to do is click heads, right, he can just basically turn off his comms and just try to do that, like get the picks for his team and win them games. So that's just like a major advantage in terms of flexibility that they have, that like maybe let's say GodsB does become competitive, then they can sort of compare where the mechanical skill lies, and if they actually need communication going into a certain meta. If they have, I think, let's say Sombra to be played, then probably they play GodsB, or I think even SeoMinSoo could be fielded then. But if it's just like a Widow meta or an Ashe meta, I could totally see Shy being fielded instead, no matter what the rest of his teammates are, like what the rest of the lineup is. So yeah, I think
We
yeah,
sometimes we
go on.
sometimes saw Architect on the Tracer, if I remember correctly, last
Yeah,
season, and
yeah,
over GodsB sometimes for the Tracer role. I would be interested in seeing what like which players they would field for like Tracer Ash, for example. Like who goes on Tracer, who goes on Ash.
mm,
I would expect probably Shy to stay on the Ash, and then I don't know who they would pick between Architect and GodsB for the Tracer there.
yeah. It was really odd at certain points in the previous season where they put GodsB on Genji and Architect on Tracer, because it's like the opposite of the hero that they are famous for, right? So yeah, I mean we'll just have to see. I hope the coaching staff isn't as confused and is a bit more clear on where these players' strengths lie and utilize them better this season. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Uh, should we then move on to the supports?
Sure. Yeah.
All right then. So Hangzhou has currently got IDK and Mika on main support, the same as last year. They've retained Coldest on flex support. They lost Bebe and now they've got MCD. So that's four supports. So this is actually a 12-man roster right now. Uh, Gives them a ton of flexibility. But yeah, let's start talking about the main supports first. I think let's kick things off with IDK and Mika. Do you want to go first on this one, or should I?
You can go ahead, I think.
All right, cool. So speaking of IDK, most famous for his Lucio play. Uh, I mean, he is still a great main support according to me. He's probably not what he was in season 2, but he's still going strong. He's still a consistent player, and I don't think you can attribute Hangzhou's lack of success in 2020 to his play. Mostly because, I mean, main support is such a position where you cannot carry. In no way can you be sort of the main influencer in your team's success. Um, so I think he's still a good player, and he's being complemented by Mika, who the Spark fielded mainly for Mercy and sometimes for Big. Mika, I think, is an average main support, but it's good that he's sort of slotting into the Mercy role, who he's more comfortable playing compared to IDK. Uh, so this is sort of like a nice rotation this team has got going on. But if they are planning on sort of splitting their team into like a Chinese lineup and a Korean lineup, which actually I don't know how they'll do because they just have one Chinese DPS player. Anyway, so it really depends on if they want to divide the main support role based on hero preference or based on the players being fielded. But all in all, I think the main support position is in good hands. I don't think it's something formidable, but it's still a pretty good lineup because IDK and Mika can cover each other's weaknesses for the most part. They don't have an insanely good brick player, which is a bit worrying. But I mean, if you've got Mercy and Lucio, that's still 2 out of 3 main supports covered, and maybe you can ask either one of your DPS players who knows how to play brick or one of your flex supports to then sort of flex onto that role. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the main supports, and you can go next.
Yeah, my thoughts on the main supports are just that Hangzhou is probably one of the few teams in the league that are prepared for a double main support meta.
Mercy
No,
Lucio.
nobody sees it coming. You have, yeah, Mercy Lucio, they bring back multiple hero select in Overwatch 2. You bring out the double Lucio. Hangzhou is the only team that's got it. In all seriousness, I think yeah, IDK definitely shown a bit brighter in season 2, but I think that's just to do with the fact that Lucio was a lot more prominent in season 2, whereas you saw a lot more double flex support in season 3. Obviously, on maps like Hangzhou, you would see teams like Shock pull out the Lucio, but I mean, if you can't play Lucio, then how will you shine on Lucio, right? If I remember correctly, IDK did play the BAP for Hangzhou uh, at times, and yeah, you're right. And I think that like MCD and Coldest have not shown that much BAP play, if I remember correctly. Like I've tried to watch Element Mystic MCD on Element Mystic, and I haven't seen too much BAP play out of him.
MCD has played. MCD plays a good map, from what I've
He
seen.
does.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, then it'll be interesting to see if they still try to put IDK because that's what they're comfortable with. But yeah, if MCD does play a good map, then they'll probably put him on map because that's his job. Um, but yeah, the Brig thing is a bit concerning, but they're professionals; they should be able to pick it up. It wa- but the thing is, it's probably not going to be top tier, and Brig just finds a way to somehow be played every single time. I don't know how it works, but this hero is always there somehow. So I guess that might be kind of a weakness for them. Apart from that, they have kind of similar hero pools. Uh, for the break thing, I think they can just maybe throw a player into development, just like instead of Brig and ranked and nothing else, while the other one plays in Overwatch League. Maybe that's what they'll do. But yeah, I mean, decent main supports. You can go ahead with the flex supports if you want.
yeah. Sure. Yeah, I think you can kick us off then.
Okay. MCD has experience with Element Mystic. He's a good player. And Coldest obviously was was there last season. He was not bad definitely, but it's just that the level of flex supports in the league is so good that you can't call him top tier, even if he's quite good, just because the talent in the league is insane. Um, I think I'd probably they would really have to see which player to play in like through scrims and through trial and error. I'm not sure which one I honestly prefer. Uh, I think some people might go with MCD, but I really have no idea to be perfectly honest with you. Which one do you think they would probably play more?
Okay, so here's my theory, right? From what I've seen, MCD does well in sustain heavy metas. So if it's like a Moira meta or sometimes even a BAP meta, if it's like either a double shield or a Sahog or even a Ryan Zarya meta, let's say, his BAP
So
is generally,
basically,
yeah.
basically, uh, MCD turns into McDonald's when his team is feeding. He has to heal them up as Moira because they take insane amounts of damage.
Yeah, basically, I think that's a good analogy.
Okay,
So
let's hear the rest of your theory.
yeah, and then they put, so Coldest seems to have more mechanical skill overall. I mean, because MCD, even though he has been on Element Mystic for really long, he has been playing in recent metas. So I mean, he was replaced by the other flex support. Damn, I forgot his name. But yeah, so overall, if it's something like a Mercy Zen meta or an Ana Mercy meta, I think they will play Coldest because Ana Zen are the heroes he is most famous for playing. I mean, Coldest was hyped a lot coming into season 3 because he was touted as one of the best flex supports to come out of China. And he didn't see much playtime over Bebe, but I mean, from what little we saw of him, he didn't show us like very mind blowing performances. I think he's probably like an average flex support. I mean, when you've got competition in the Asian region like You've got Alarm, you've got 1987, you've even got Jonak, who's still pretty competitive. I don't think Coldest is someone who's going to stand out especially well. So it's just going to be a matter of what the focus of the meta is. Like I said, if it's a sustain heavy brawly meta, then you will see MCD, and if it's a more dive focused meta, then you will see Coldest. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think some people do get it confused when they try and put across Coldest as just having good stats. But the thing is that Hangzhou preferred playing Bebe anyway.
Mm.
So when they played Coldest, they were probably a bit more confident that they would do well. So he tends to have better stats just because they put him in easier matches to get experience and to not just be benched for his contract. Um, I think that you're right that you'll probably see MCD on the Moira, and with Coldest you have to kind of think of him in. I mean, you can try and be optimistic about it, but you have to think that he is, according to Hangzhou's coaches at least, if nothing else, a bit of a lower standard player than Bebe. So that's probably
Mm.
where you have to start basing your expectations off of. And actually, now that I think about it, in that sense, I'd probably see MCD in for the most part, unless Coldest really does perform in scrims. Because I think he is a player that's at least got more experience as of late, considering that Coldest is just benched over Baby all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. We also have to consider the fact that this team has so far been communicating in Korean. So I think communication might also have been a barrier for Coldest coming in to the team last year. But he's had a lot of time to work on it right now, so that shouldn't really be an excuse at this point. Uh, but yeah, it really depends on what the head coach Pajion has in mind, whom I think we can talk about next if we're done with the supports.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I watched MCD's stream like once or twice. His alt is named SeoMinSoo, like SoManSoo instead of SeoMinSoo. So it'll be very cool to see SoMinSoo and SoManSoo in the same match. I'm
Man,
looking forward to that.
sure, why not? And then yeah, then let's move on to talking about Pajion, who's the head coach of the Hangzhou Spark. Um, I think I'll take the lead on this one. So overall, I think Pajion is a great coach. He coached the Vancouver Titans in season 2 of the Overwatch League, and well, he made them one of the most dominant teams that we had seen. Probably only second to the Shock. And he had also before that done great things with Fusion Uni. He was coaching contenders and had helped them win multiple titles. So he's a smart guy. I think he is going to steer the Spark in the right direction. He was sort of brought in, I think, like into a very chaotic setup. He wasn't able to build up the roster that he had in mind, I think. And with some of the additions, I think especially getting in SeoMinSoo and BERNAR are probably his ideas because they were with him earlier. So now that he's sort of having more control over the players on the roster, he's able to sort of get his picks onto the team. I think the team will do better in under his guidance. So overall, I'm really optimistic about the direction which the Spark are taking under Pajion's leadership. And yeah, do you have any more points, Nightwing?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned that Pajion might have brought in Bernard just because of his kind of bias from Fusion University, but
Mm-hmm.
also, I mean, I guess you can't just base Bernard's skill over what you see on the scoreboard for Overwatch League. I think if Pajion is a good coach, he has had successful runaway. I mean, even if the a lot of the power behind that squad was the synergy that the players already had, just playing together for so long. He is a coach that has had success before working with Hangzhou, so maybe he's onto something with Bernard. Um, but yeah, I mean, maybe he can do something now that he's got to form a squad according to his preference, and maybe they can figure something out.
Yeah. So I think then we can just talk about what we feel about this overall roster and what we think the Sparks trajectory is going to be right now in season 4. And I think I'll let you go first, Nightwing.
For Hangzhou this season, I think they have a lot of stiff competition in the Asia region. Uh, I think I'm a bit concerned about the DPS department, honestly. I think they're not quite as stacked as some of these other lineups are, and I think that might just lead to their undoing. But they have a solid main tank. They have good off tanks, like at least a good off tank in Liga, and I mean they've got something going on. Their flex supports are probably not top tier, uh, and their main supports are just kind of there with a big brig shaped hole in the middle. So yeah, it's looking a bit concerning for Hangzhou, I think, this season. But they've seemed to kind of make it work somehow to an average or slightly below, slightly above. It, it's in a bit of a state of flux for Hangzhou. I would not see them as a top team definitely in Asia, um, but maybe they have some, along with Pajion's vision and his revamped squad for Hangzhou, with a nice little few like additions. Maybe there's something that they can get going, punch above their weight, go above average, but not much more than that. I think that there is a lot of competition for Hangzhou that'll punch them down while they try to punch up.
Hmm. So all your points I think are very fair, but I think I'm a little bit more optimistic about this team than you are, Nightwing. The main reason being that the team has been expanded in such a way that they've got way more options in terms of whom to field and even in terms of scrimming internally. I think having 12 players gives them that major advantage that they can just have like two separate teams and then scrim like within their own organization. And I mean, not only that, they've got two players on each sub role essentially. They've got two main tanks, two off tanks, two main supports, two flex supports, and two hit scan and two flex DPS, right? So this gives them options not only with respect to hero pools, but also with respect to play styles, with respect to the kind of communication they want, the level of communication they want, because they've got some Chinese players, some Korean players, and from what we've seen, they communicate mainly in Korean, so they've got a lot to figure out on that front as well. So I think I mean, it's both a good thing and a bad thing, right? To have so many options because then you might never really think that you're playing the optimal lineup or the optimum play style or the optimum composition. But I think the reason this team is likely to do well rather than poorly is because of the sort of flexibility that the roster has currently. And Pajion is smart. I think he understands these players' strengths and weaknesses, and he definitely has some plan in mind for them. So I think, I mean, naturally, I don't think they are going to be a top tier team either. But if the meta favors them and if Pajon is smart with his moves, I think they could make a sneak. They could sneak into the playoffs. Essentially, is what I'm saying. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts on the Hangzhou Spark. And do you have any more points to add, Nightwing?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of have a apples to apples kind of comparison
Mm-hmm.
for Hangzhou within the region. I'm not. First of all, you mentioned that the bigger squad, it being a 12-man squad, could help them. But you look at season one winners, London Spitfire. They were very up and down for a lot of the season in season one because they had a crap ton of players and they just kept changing them in and out. But when they really shone in playoffs, they kind of just kicked or benched the players that they do not want. They set up a particular squad that they wanted, and they stuck to that squad, um, and that's where they really kind of pulled through in the playoffs. Otherwise, you were just going to see NYXL run away with the season, right? So I'm not sure if having a 12-man squad is always for the best. Obviously, with teams like Shock, you see that their expanded roster is being used properly, but that comes down to the coach. Um, Obviously, there is some kind of faith being put into Pajion, and so that might work out well. But I think it's something that remains to be seen. If you look at their players, they're probably going to have comm issues. Shy coming in probably does not know that great Korean, I would imagine, considering that he's a Chinese player. Other teams, you look at NYXL, all Korean. You look at Philadelphia, they're all going to speak English. You look at Seoul, they're all going to speak Korean. Shanghai is going to speak Korean, apart from Molly. Like a lot of these teams are going to find it a lot easier to calm. They're going to find it a lot. They have better standards of flex supports. I think Hangzhou is in for a rough time. It's great to be optimistic. I just don't agree with you.
Fair enough, fair enough. And yeah, I think we've both pretty much shared all of our thoughts on the Hangzhou Spark, and I'm very interested to see where we actually place them in our final rankings, considering that we are a little bit in disagreement. But yeah, I think should we round things off, Nightwing, on this episode?
Yeah, I think we've gone like on long enough.
All right, cool. So yeah, that concludes our episode on the Hangzhou Spark, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. Uh, if you liked our discussion and our analyses, then remember to like the video. Do comment down in the comment section and share your thoughts on the Hangzhou Spark with us. We'd love to hear them. Uh,
Comment your favorite Hangzhou Spark player and
Good.
which hero do you think? I don't know. Just comment your favorite Hangzhou Spark player and tell me why it's Architect.
I'm pretty sure that the answer is not going to be because he was on the Shock Nightwing. But anyway, yeah, if you guys want to see more reviews from us, remember to subscribe and click on the bell icon so you see when we update more videos. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for helping us keep the conversation about the league alive. And Nightwing, which is the next team you're going to do?
Uh, have we done? We've done Toronto, right? Have we?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Do you want to do Toronto? They have like 9 players. We have something going for them.
Let's do
I
it.
still don't know what they're doing, but yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, guys, we do the Toronto Define next. So stay tuned for that, and we will catch you later.